Something that I've always taken an effort of doing is making sure that my clients understand their program. So whenever a new client signs up with me, what I end up doing with their program is I go through every single exercise and explain to them exactly why I've programmed that in their program, and also explain essentially the intent behind it, how I want it to be performed, whether that is with a variation of a squat, bench, or deadlift, or if it's an accessory. And the reason why I do this is because I really want my clients to understand exactly why I've prescribed that to them so they can train with more intent and purpose. Now, when it comes to training, and as I developed my knowledge and my skills as a coach, I came to learn that there was a term called buy-in. So buy-in started as an investment term, basically used in the financial sector to explain someone buying into a company. So that could be something like buying shares or buying stakes in a company because they believed in its future success. Essentially, you wouldn't buy shares in a company if you're an investor if you didn't believe that it would succeed, right? Ultimately, and at the end of the day, like the number one thing that you look for when you invest is basically return, future return, some sort of like future success. And that term has now started to be used, I don't know whether it's recent or it has been used in training to essentially explain a lifter or athlete's belief in their own program. And I would argue that up to 50% of the success of a program is dependent on a lifter's buy-in. Now, that's not evidence-based, so don't quote me on that, but what I think is really, what I'm trying to say really is having a client or having an athlete really believe in their program, really believe that they'll get stronger or X rehab exercise will result in X outcome, whether they're going through an injury, is a big determinant of its success. And the reason why I say this is because not just from personal experience as myself as an athlete, but experience working with clients that if they really believe that something would work, it is quite likely that it would work. And I know that it sounds a bit like fucking airy-fairy right now, but I think when it comes to programming for powerlifting specifically, what I'm learning more and more is that almost anything could work, whether it be high volume, high intensity. Obviously, there is an optimal amount of volume, optimal amount of intensity for different individuals. But when it comes to individualization, any sort of variation, any sort of set scheme, any sort of rep scheme could potentially work for them as long as, one, it makes sense. It makes logical sense that it could work. With that being said, there are some things that I've done with clients which just don't make logical sense but end up working anyway, whether it be like moving a deadlift day closer, seemingly like it would seem that it would accumulate, the lifter would accumulate more fatigue and cause like a upcoming deadlift day to feel weaker, but it doesn't. Things like that just like happen to work when it logically doesn't make sense for it to work. Other that, or the other, I guess, like main reason why it would work is because both the coach and the athlete believes that it actually would work. Now, when it comes to buy-in, I don't expect the lifter or the athlete to just blindly follow and blindly believe in the coach and the program. Because at the end of the day, like a lifter or an athlete is reaching out to a coach for their expertise, for their knowledge, and for their assistance. And so I do believe that it's the responsibility and the duty of the coach to really explain to the athlete, I've given you these X amount of exercises with these rep schemes and these set schemes because this is the outcome that we're trying to achieve. And by achieving these outcomes, this is how we're going to get to our goals. That is really how I break down the way that I program to my clients. And any change that I make throughout the blocks or even like weekly changes that I might make to clients, I explain to as much detail as I feel is needed for the client to understand that that is the intent and that is the purpose behind it. So I do think that if you're an athlete or you're a lifter and you're not really sure about the outcomes of your training, and you're just training for the sake of training, and perhaps you don't feel that motivated to train, or you don't feel motivated to push accessories for example, or you don't feel motivated to push that volume of high bar squats, for example, it could be worthwhile asking your coach why it's been programmed. Because by understanding that it's the intent and its purpose, you can then train with intent and purpose, right? I feel like this is a missing piece to a lot of people's program. And it's not about the programming. It's not about the things you do. It's not about the variations that you have in your program. It's literally just about understanding exactly why you're doing these things. As a coach, I think that, if you feel like your lifter is not performing to the best of their abilities, they're not really fulfilling their potential, they're not really getting there, right? They're not really understanding the importance of having to push a certain accessory, or push a certain variation, or push a certain secondary or tertiary day. The reason could be that they don't understand why you've given that to them. And I'm not saying that you've done anything wrong. It's not a bad thing that you've done. But by not explaining the changes to a program to a client, and not going through those details, it could be causing them to stagnate in their progress, because they're not training with that intent that you want for them, right? And as a coach, like, we all want our lifters to do their best. We all want our lifters to continue to progress. But I really do think that a missing piece is making sure that the athlete understands exactly why they're doing a certain exercise, a certain accessory, and the intent behind it. Even if the intent is just like, we just want to get more volume because you're not fit right now, right? That can give an athlete enough purpose to push those and prove to you, perhaps, like it might fuel them to prove to you that actually I am fitter. I'm getting fitter by doing these volume sets of squats, or I am getting fitter by doing these 30 minutes of cardio before, 30 minutes of walking before I train, or I do feel better when I do a certain exercise, right? That could be enough to get an athlete to really switch on and change the way that they approach their training. And ultimately, by approaching their training with more intent and more purpose, that can make things change dramatically. I have a personal example where I was self-coached for a period of time. It was about 8 weeks. And the reason why I was self-coached was because I went on holiday, I went away for a week, and I didn't train that week. And I know that whenever I don't train for a week, I get detrained hard. Like, it takes me a whole 5-week block just for me to get back into, just for things to feel normal again, like feel like things were the same as before I went on holiday. That is to say, like, I probably don't want to take another week of training because it is just so frustrating to come back to that. But anyway, I decided to just get self-coached or become self-coached for that period of time after I went on holiday, because I just didn't see the value of getting coached when my training wasn't going to be good anyway. I'm not saying that this is something you should do. It was just a personal decision. And I also wanted some time to explore training on my own. And so what happened was I essentially wrote a similar program to what I was running before, but arguably with less intent and less purpose. I was kind of just running what I was doing before for the sake of running it, just so I could continue doing something. I did trial a few things with bench that block, which was quite purposeful. Like, I tapered the volume that I was running on my primary day before my primary day, and that ended up working really well. I ended up PRing on my bench on 5 kilos. But with squats and deads, they were just so lackluster. Like, I was going into my sessions demotivated. I was not pushing my secondary days. I wasn't pushing accessories. I was even skipping some accessories, right? And I've come to realize that the reason why is because I just wasn't bought into my program. There was no intent behind doing my program. There was no purpose behind it. And I wasn't convinced that what I was doing was going to get me stronger. I was just convinced that it would get me back to how I was feeling before I left, which didn't even happen. I still felt shitty after that block. And so when I got back to my coach, my coach had given me this whole 15-minute Loom video on the program that he'd written for me, the purpose behind it, why we're running like volume on this day, why we're running these certain accessories, the purpose behind these certain accessories to help build my bench, to help build squats, to help build deadlifts. And it's been 2 weeks since I've gotten back to coaching, and my training has improved dramatically. It's improved so much so quickly. Like the numbers that I'm hitting in week 2 were numbers I wasn't even hitting in the last week of my previous training block, which is insane. And the difference wasn't really the programming. The difference was not really like the stimulus that I was being given. It wasn't that I'd adapted really to training stimulus. It was simply because I was approaching my training with more intent and more purpose because I was bought into that program. So if you feel like you're training without purpose, you're not really motivated, you don't really know where you're going with your training, I would argue that it's not really the programming. I would argue that it's not potentially the stimulus, but really your intent and purpose in approaching your training. Beyond that, I think that if you do need assistance with understanding the intent behind your program, if you do have a coach, definitely reach out to them and ask them about why they've programmed some certain thing. And the reason why they may have given it to you could be just that they wanted some variety in your accessories, which is perfectly valid, right? So yeah, if you do feel like you're struggling with pushing your program or pushing your training with intent and purpose, definitely reach out to your coach. If you don't have a coach and you want me to have a look at your program, don't hesitate to DM me on Instagram at kelvin.hustlesp. Send me a screenshot of your program and we can go through it together. I can have a look at what you're doing and can try really understand the purpose and intent behind your program. If you do want to inquire about online coaching, go to the link down below in the description box and follow me on Instagram at kelvin.hustlesp for more short form tips. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell for more long form tips on YouTube. See you in the next one.